The main use of useEffect is to run something when the screen loads or when a page loads or when a component loads for the first time. So it basically automatically runs something in the useEffect immediately after the screen or the page loads for the first time. Let's say you call a function inside of the useEffect, then the useEffect will run the function that you call inside the useEffect when the screen loads or when the component loads. This useEffect will then call the function and do the instructions that you put inside the function that you defined or declared earlier. But the confusing part is actually not the functionality, but it's actually the timing or when the useEffect is going to take place or when the useEffect is going to be activated. So there are two parts to useEffect. The first part is what you want the useEffect to activate when the screen or the page loads or when a component loads, which is inside the useEffect brackets. Then there's also another part, which is a dependency, where you can leave it empty if you want the things inside the useEffect to run immediately after the screen loads for the first time. Or you can put a data inside of it. So the useEffect will run every time the data in the dependency, which is inside the square bracket, make changes. So you put a variable inside the square bracket, which is the dependency, and then whenever the value of the variable changes, then this useEffect will then run the instructions inside of it, which usually means to run a function, for example, if you want to put that inside the useEffect. Then you might think that, oh, if I put a variable inside of the dependency, then won't it run every single time that the data changes or when the value of the variable changes? But no, it's actually not as simple as that. You are right to say that the useEffect will run every time the data changes or whenever the value of the variable inside the dependency changes. But it's actually not only that. The useEffect also loads every time you first launch the app, as well as whenever the value of the variable inside the dependency changes. So when the component first loads or when a page first loads, the useEffect will run also. What this means is that when the user enters a page or a component, for example, then the useEffect will run the function that you call inside of the useEffect. Then once that's done, then the future times will be when the value of the variable inside the dependency changes. So it is one time when the screen loads for the first time, and then subsequent times when the data or the value of the variable inside the dependency changes. It is not only when the value of the variable inside the dependency changes, but it's also when the screen loads for the first time. So a simple example could be a counter where you use useState to set the original number to 0, and then after you put a useState, you put a useEffect hook. As you can see from this example, the useEffect have a variable count inside the dependency, which means that whenever the count variable changes or when the value of the count variable changes, then the useEffect will run also. So let's say the user tap a decrease button or increase button, and then this will set count and use useState to update the original count from 0 to maybe like 1 when they press the increase button, which will then update the variable count, which will also means that the value of the variable count changes, which will result in running the useEffect hook. So in the useEffect hook, there is a console.log effect ran, then count is blah blah blah. So as you can notice that the console first logs effect ran, then count is 0, which means that the useEffect ran when the screen or when the counter first loads, even though I didn't even touch the decrease or increase button. Then when I touch the increase or decrease button, then the count is updated using the useState, using the set count from the useState that we defined or declared earlier. Then this will update the original count from 0 to 1, which means that the value of the count variable changes, which will then run the useEffect again to console.log effect ran blah 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 count is equals to 1. So this example can help you understand how useEffect actually works and not what you think. So in summary, when there's no dependency inside the useEffect will run only once when the screen or the variable first appear or first created. Then when there's a variable inside of the dependency, it will not only run when the variable or when the value of the variable changes, it will also run when the screen or the page first loads. So yeah, this is how useEffect works. Anyways, that's my opinion. Bye.